I believe that it's not impossible that in the next 20 years, digital art world and culture uh, on public blockchain becomes a 1 trillion market.
GM everyone, and welcome to Fuel for Thought, where we explore the multifaceted world of Web3 through the lenses of different industries and thought leaders. My name is Chris, and today we have a very inspiring guest with us, that is Jean-Michel Pailhon. He's a former executive at Ledger. He's been a collective of NFT art and photography since 2020, and he's the co-founder at Grail Capital, where he's on a mission to help investors learn about digital art and culture and make sound financial decisions. We have a lot of things to discuss today, but first things first, how are you, Jean-Michel?
Oh, Chris, I'm going so well, and thank you for having me on your video podcast. I'm looking forward to your question and to contribute to explain a little bit what digital art on blockchain is and why it will, change our life in the next decade, basically.
To be honest, it's a topic that I'm very inspired and interested about. I'm a collector of NFTs as well. I very much enjoy the cultural aspect of PFPs and the social behaviors that are tied with it, but NFT art is also a very interesting topic. So what I'd like to do with you, Jean-Michel, is to first focus on understanding what digital art is and what the opportunity that lies within is for people to, be able to get more exposure to digital art. And so that will be our second part. How can you be involved in digital art? And the third part, we will be looking at the future and trying to predict how this will, evolve as a segment of asset class. So to start with, in order to understand digital art, you say as a thesis at Grail Capital that digital art is the next 1 trillion asset class, $1 trillion asset class. So how do you define digital art and what are the pillars of your thesis?
Wow, that's a good question. So the way I see things, and that's just my personal view, that obviously is the Grail Capital view, is that um, I would draw the line between art and culture. So for me, for instance, art is when there is an artistic process of creation, and when art is the objective of creating a piece of art and therefore an NFT. So and sometimes the frontier is quite blurry between art and culture. But if I take two concrete examples, uh, for me, CryptoPunk is art because the way it has been conceived, and also because of the kind of uh, pre-existing artistic movement that is inspired by, which is the pixel art, for instance, that we know quite a lot about. And all those styles by Space Invaders and many artists who played with this kind of medium in the past. CryptoPunks are art. Now, Bored Ape, for instance, who are PFPs as well, they are more culture. I don't think, even though the creators of the visuals were great creators in design, I don't think that the artistic aspects behind the first iteration, and specifically the Bored Ape, the visual is probably not the key element in the value of this collection and what followed after that, that has been done by Yuga Labs. Just from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from a kind of artistic standpoint, you cannot necessarily retrieve, link with previous art movement in the past. And for those of you who know and follow the history of art, it's always very important to have an art piece that is not alone, but that is connected with the past, the present, and ideally the future. And sometimes it's the future of certain art segments. So voilà, that's again the line between art and culture for me is sometimes blurry, but you have to be sometimes a bit decisive in things that you think are art or not. And again, I think that digital art is really when the artistic approach was the key element in creating the piece, and less the utility or the gamification that is behind certain projects. And PFP for me are mostly out of the art segment of digital art. We put them somehow right now because it's a mix between art and culture, and we don't want to be too exclusive, and we want to be inclusive, and therefore that's why we tend to believe that digital art can sometimes include PFPs, but not all of them.
Got it. Very clear. So we touched on PFPs. We touched on what you would call digital art. For example, I would assume there's gen art, etc. How would you structure the sub-segmentation of digital art? Like, what are the different categories that you identify and suggest to your investors?
Yeah. Um, it's basically when we started launching Grail, and obviously before actually launching Grail, we really looked at the market both from a macro and a micro level. Macro level, we started to look at the market and say, okay, what are the different categories of digital art and culture? And obviously, we quickly found some very easy ones. So I will just put them right now. So you have PFPs and collectibles that are the most important one in size. And we mentioned that with the CryptoPunk, the Bored Ape, the Azuki, the Pudgy Penguin, and many things like that. Then we have a second category that is the generative art that you mentioned. That is actually a very important category of the digital art and culture movement. And then we have AI art, which is also very important because that's a subsegment. That's a segment that has been made of artists who create digital art through AI, so through artificial intelligence. And obviously, the one that are the most iconic one are the one who did some AI art before Midjourney and before ChatGPT. So basically, the guy and the girls who did AI art in 2020 and actually 2018 for Robbie Barra, who was the first one, and then Claire Silver in 2021, and then Rup Rinesto in 22 and 23, and people like that basically. So AI art is also a very important art segment. Photography is also obviously a very important segment as well. That I'm quite involved in at a personal collector standpoint. And then the rest is actually extremely complex to come up with a name because there are so many subcategories that are 3D motion, digital painting, and many others. And I think that we are still missing a kind of taxonomy, of the global digital art world. So that's also something that we are working on, not alone, but with people that are working in history of art mostly, and trying to kind of coming up with a canonic way to present the different art segments.
I was reading a report the other day by a large consulting company and the World Economic Forum that also suggested a framework for taxonomy. And it seems to me it's also very important to move this space forward because in the traditional art world, I assume you have this type of framework that allows investors to know, okay, this is how it's going to work. And here with NFTs, it's also blurry. Like the large majority of people, I would assume, consider NFTs as like one big thing that is just it's like NFTs, but then dude, in NFTs there's so much and such different applications, use cases, ways that you would invest in them. It doesn't make sense to consider them as a whole. So I understand what you mean. And going back to the point of NFT photography, about which you're passionate, how big of segment does it represent today? It seems to me when you compare it to generative art, for example, or even AI art, it seems to me photography hasn't found like the right narrative to really like go to the forefront. I see a lot of talented photographers. I see Drifter Shoots and all those other guys that are being collected at very high price points, but they're very seldom compared to gen art. So how large of a segment does it represent in the digital art world? And then one thing I forgot to ask you is how big actually is the digital art world today versus your target of $1 trillion?
Yeah. So we should start by that, and then I will answer the photography question, which is a great one. So we did the math, and basically we came with a very interesting figure, which basically we scrapped all the public data regarding, all the collections and all the one-on-one that are listed on OpenSea, on Foundation, SuperRare, Art Blocks, wherever. And we came to the conclusion, and basically we scrapped the data, and we run our engine of calculation, and we arrived. We arrived early September. Probably that because of the pump in ETH price, it has changed a bit. But in early September, the global digital art market on blockchain was a 5 billion USD market. 5 billion. So again, right now, probably because of the pump in ETH, it's probably more like around 6, I would say. But we need to do the math again. That I
And
will be
that's
doing
only
that.
on Ethereum, right?
Yes, but alors, yes, but 98% of the market is on Ethereum.
Uh-huh. And the two remaining percent, like, is there a second blockchain where
There
digital
is
art
like
is represented?
it's like split between Tezos, it's uh, Solana a bit, and the rest. But honestly, it's like for well, I mean the real digital art market is only on Ethereum for now. Tezos, even though it's relatively small, has really found its place as a kind of emerging blockchain for artists and creators, and therefore for collectors. But the prices there are much, much smaller than Ethereum. And for instance, I know some artists who are doing almost the same collection, let's say one on Ethereum and one on Tezos. And the one on Tezos will be 20 times less expensive than the one on Ethereum. And even though the quality of the collection is exactly the same, and the reason is simply because Tezos is a very small, blockchain. I think it's less than 1 billion of market cap as we speak. And also there's a lot of, for good and bad reason, I guess, there's a lot of low expectation by the market participants, so traders and collectors, that this blockchain will still be there in 10 years, which is probably wrong, but that's what the market believes, and therefore that means that collectors that I know, especially the big one, they are struggling to kind of collect massively on Tezos for now, which is probably a good opportunity, by the way, for young collectors that want to create a good collection at a relatively cheap entry point. But for the big collector, they are still not there yet. So, and we'll see, maybe they will come.
It's funny, I've been collecting a little bit on Tezos and much less on Ethereum when it comes to digital art. Why? Because prices are so prohibitive, and so the cost of opportunity of putting your capital in one piece of digital art in Ethereum is high, versus if you go on Tezos, I mean, it's real collecting. Like, it's like, oh, I'll get one of this and one of this, and it's a lot of fun actually. So I really encourage, from a collector standpoint, for people to go on Tezos. Now, from an investor standpoint, I don't know about it, that's your thing, but it's a lot of fun.
I totally agree with what you said. And actually, even in 2021, especially when the price of gas fees on Ethereum were crazy, and obviously the artworks were very high priced as well. Most of the people I was onboarding in NFTs, helping them creating a wallet and starting their collection, I always brought them on the Tezos ecosystem, exactly for the reason you said, good art and relatively cheap. So, and obviously everybody who start to do that, they should always remember that they shall afford to just not need this money, and not wait for a financial return either in the short or the medium or long term, and they just need to grow a passion for digital art. And for sure, Tezos is a very good entry point for that. And again, from an investor standpoint, that's a different approach, because what is important for investors is to minimize the risk and basically make sure that there is a high chance that the investor that are putting their money at work on an artwork in digital form that they will get their money back if they have to sell in 5-10 years, and ideally with a profit. But at the very least, to be sure that they will get their money back. And again, to have their money back, they need to be 100% sure that the blockchain will still be around in 10 years. And again, right now, the market believes that Ethereum will still be there in 10 years, and the market is kind of not sure if Tezos will still be there in 10 years. That's as simple as that.
What's your perspective on ordinals and the Bitcoin blockchain for art?
Alors, Ordinals is a bit. I'm still working on it in the sense that I'm working, on understanding it, and doing a lot of research. From a very artistic standpoint, for now, I am not very interested. I believe, and I've been in Bitcoin before I was in Ethereum, so I kind of like Bitcoin a lot, and I think that is the reason why we are there today is because of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin as an innovation, massive innovation, probably the largest one for the past 20 years with AI, has changed and will change a lot of things. But again, I don't think that Bitcoin was made for creation and distribution and transfer of art and culture, because the blockchain is not made for that. So some very smart, core developers found this way to use the Satoshi's, bandwidth, I would say, to create those kind of room for storing hashes that eventually relate with a digital image. I think it's okay from a technological angle. It's not perfect. It's way less, I would say, it's way less interesting than on Ethereum, to be frank, simply because Ethereum was, especially the ERC 721, was built for that. So I think that for now, I'm studying it. I don't have a total, firm opinion on ordinals. They are there to stay for sure. Will they catch up with the digital art that is on Ethereum? I'm still not sure.
Got it. So tracing back to my original question, then photography.
Photography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What share of the market is that, and like how do you perceive it? It seems to me it's a little bit of a underdog when it comes to the top 3 segments.
Alors, 100%. So again, start with the 5 billion USD market cap of digital art. Photography is only 50 million. So it's a very, very, very small market. Alors, is it right to be so small? I don't believe so. And I don't believe so for 2 simple reasons. First, because actually, when you look at photography, I'm not talking about digital art. I'm talking about photography as an art segment of the contemporary art market. It's a relatively big market, but it's a relatively young market, because basically photography became a kind of art segment only 25 years ago. Before that, photography was not considered as art. It was considered as in big galleries and in big museums, it was almost not presented. There were very, very few artists who were famous, like Cartier-Bresson and Man Ray and a few people like that. But they were famous, and specifically Man Ray, not only because of his photography, but because of what he did as a painter or creator in general. And therefore, photography has been an underdog. So that's funny, because for me, hearing some people that are collecting photography in physical form right now, and that are extremely negative against NFT, I said to them, guys, 25 years ago you were on my seat, so please just take a little bit of distance, because what you believe is art right now and what you believe is not art right now, you were in the same situation 25 years ago. And the second reason why I believe that photography in digital form, and specifically as an NFT, has a big potential, is because actually 95% of the photography produced right now are made on a digital camera, which means that the original file that you do, that is created by an artist, is actually natively in a digital form. It's not anymore a physical negative. It's a digital negative right now. And to me, again, NFT, because it's digital native as well, is the perfect medium to capture and store and distribute this digital negative all around the world. So for me, the potential of photography through NFT is massive. It's also true that what we saw in that market for the past 3 years is that most of the artists who become somehow famous in the NFT art world were not famous in the previous photography world, I would say, or in print, basically. Apart for a few like Justin Aversano and a few of them, most of the photographers that are now the leaders and the most sought after artists in the photography world in NFT format, they were simply not there before. So that's also one of the reasons. But I really believe that this art segment has big potential. And how big can it be? I don't know. And obviously, but again, I really believe that the kind of the price right now are extremely low. You can have really nice artworks from really talented photographers at relatively cheap price. And I really believe that it can be for those who want to collect again and do a nice collection, for the next 10 or 15 years. That's probably a very interesting segment to look into and to start to collect in right now.
Cool. So that's a piece of alpha I'll be taking with me after that episode. And guys, we'll dig into some of Jean-Michel's favorites and a little bit of more granular alpha as we move forward with the episode. I'd like to just wrap up this understanding digital art and the opportunity part with a question about the collectors. Like, how do you categorize or segment digital art collectors today? Is it mostly in Web3? Is it also traditional art collectors that are being interested in it? And then within those groups, how do you categorize them?
Well, right now, to be quite direct, almost 99% of the digital art collectors are crypto owners. And most, if not all of them, are able to collect art right now in digital form because they own some ETH or some Bitcoin, and most of them actually own them for quite some time and at relatively cheap price. And if you look at the biggest name in the market, even though they are not personal collector because they have a company behind them, but if you look at 6529, Cosomo, and other people like that, they are whales basically somehow in ETH, and they basically kind of started their digital art career, and they became very big because of their financial capacity in ETH. And obviously they are good collector, by the way, so that's not to dismiss them or whatsoever, but and right now if you look at the market, there is very few traditional art collectors. And the reason is because NFT has been it's like internet in 2K, and basically it's a name. It's a name that has been used so much with so much so much buzz around it, that a lot of people from the traditional art world, and specifically the collectors, have been somehow not very much impressed and not very interested simply by the NFT art world for now, and that's okay, I must say. They are probably a part of their rationale is okay, and I think probably for some of them it's okay and right. I also believe that, generally speaking, every time there is something new, whether it's an art segment, whether it's a technological medium, and every time the traditional, what we call the people that are already there, so the kind of incumbents, as we say in traditional strategy, the incumbents usually they don't really understand, and they don't really want to understand, because they understand their world so well, which is the traditional art world, that they have no incentive to look in this tiny little thing that is just on the side, and that is a bit weird when you first look at it. And therefore, no, most of the collectors, all of the collectors, are native crypto owners, and very few traditional art collectors are in the market right now. But that's, again, one of the missions of Grail Capital, to bring those traditional art collectors and big foundations and even museums to enter the field of digital art by helping them, understanding it and eventually collecting the right piece.
From market cap of this whole category standpoint, I think it's also very important that institutions start collecting art because, well, of course, they'll be holding for longer periods, I assume, than private collectors who may be investing for shorter time frames, especially when you think about museums and everything. So I'm really looking forward to, your work becoming bigger and bigger and having a bigger impact in the industry. From a cultural standpoint, I think that it's also important that at this very early stage in this new segment, that collectors are within the crypto environment because they have a perspective and understanding of what the art represents that is different from traditional investors. And the culture that is brewing here, when I think of it, it reminds me of, I was young at that point in time, but I've read about what was brewing in the streets of New York, in the 1990s, and this whole street culture movement that was born in the streets and then invaded, like spread across the world, influenced the biggest fashion houses, Louis Vuitton doing collaborations with street culture artists, and so to me, it's very important that right now we have like this very powerful brew of culture that is within the digital space before expanding. I have a question for you on the evolution of or like the behavior of digital art in the context of like macroeconomic events or NFT market events, because we see, for example, with the crypto crash and the PFP crash, digital art has been holding pretty strong compared to those other asset classes. So how have you identified trends in relation to other events in the digital art market?
Oh yeah. So right now, again, because of the previous answer I gave regarding, who are the digital art collector mostly coming from crypto, obviously, at least for the past 2 years, let's say, a large portion of the evolution of digital art in demand and price has been mostly driven by the crypto cycle. That has been the case. And actually, if you again look at the digital art on public blockchain right now, it's only a 3 years old asset class because there were very few art available as NFTs in 18 and 19. It started a little bit in 20, but really the pivotal moment is 21. And obviously, the people 5,000 first days that made 69 million at Christie's, in March 21, really is the pivotal moment. It's like AD and AC, it's before and after. It brought a lot of new collectors, it brought a lot of visibility, and it brought a lot of new creators and new artists that discovered the NFT because of that. So again, it's a relatively young asset class and a young art market. And so far, and with only those kind of almost 3 years now historic data, the correlation with crypto is very high. I tend to believe that this correlation will eventually change. It will change, and probably the correlation will be less important for many reasons. Probably also because as soon as it becomes a real art segment in itself, just like you have street art, you've got photography, cubism, and whatsoever, I tend to believe that it will live its own life. But again, if you look at the traditional art market as an asset class, the correlation with stocks, for instance, generally speaking, with the overall economical cycle in which we are, is extremely highly correlated. So that means that when the market is going well, stock markets, usually the contemporary art market is going relatively well. There is a moment where the economy is going down and the stocks are going down, and basically there is a bit of for a while, there is a bit of, flight to quality or storage of value for art, and therefore a bit of money is continuing to flowing into the art world. So you have the stocks that are going down and the art that continue to go up, but usually it doesn't last. And actually, if we look at this cycle right now, the one in which we are, it's exactly what happened. So the market, the stock market kind of had a difficult moment a year ago, and the art market continued to increase a little bit and then totally stopped. And for those who were at Freeze in London 2 weeks ago and Basel in June, and that will go to Basel Miami in December, I know that right now the market is not the art market from a traditional contemporary art market world is not extremely active and not very bullish, I would say. So again, I think that digital art will probably not change much on that. So that's not a problem per se for me.
Mhm. Okay, clear. So moving to the next part, I want to understand how people listening to us and myself can get better exposed to digital art, because we've seen it's a great opportunity. There's a lot of room for growth. It's highly relevant from a cultural perspective, and the technology only makes it more bullish. How do you get exposed to digital art? Like, what do you have to do?
You have to do two things. You can do 2 or 3 things, I would say. So if I really summarize, you have 3 ways. For me, it always starts by actually, whatever you do, I always advise people to create a wallet. Obviously, do it on an hardware wallet because it's very important, because we never know. It's better be safe than sorry in 5-10 years. So create a wallet with an hardware wallet, create a software wallet to kind of be more agile and be able to interact with OpenSea, with MetaMask and stuff. But create an hardware wallet and then start to look at, navigate in the art world, going through the different platforms and going on Twitter to look at, what is appealing to you. That's I would say, the art amateur way to do things, and that's perfectly fine because it's a journey, and becoming a collector is a journey, so it's never ending. I would say you keep on hopefully being better. You learn every day, and you have to start somewhere, and this is the starting point. But I would advise people to not collect immediately, and to wait for some time to be sure that what they see they like, and what they see they like has some value. Because in the world in which we are living in, there's a lot of image everywhere, and we tend to really act with our reptilian brain, and by just buying what we like at the moment. But this moment might be not lasting forever. And so for me, it's very important that people take their time to be sure that what they see they like is cultural significant, that it will still be there in 5 years, 10 years, especially if they start to pay a relatively high price. That's really my first advice. So direct exposure to NFTs can be done, but it has to be done in the right way. First, create a wallet on an hardware wallet, and then take your time to navigate. That's the first way. The second way is to go indirect through, for instance, DAO or art club. There's a lot of DAO and group of collectors that are gathering themselves to basically collect together, and it might be a good way as well, because then you learn from the others, and you can confront your own ideas and your own aesthetic approach compared to others, and that is also a good way to get exposure to the digital art world. And obviously, the last one, which is the pure indirect, is to go through, certain professional digital art fund like Grail Capital, for sure. That being said, I must say to the audience that Grail Capital, because we are targeting mostly high net worth individuals, corporations, financial investors, and generally speaking, qualified investors, as we speak, the entry level is extremely high, and therefore that means that it's like it's an alternative asset class, and therefore we act like an alternative investment fund, and therefore that means that the minimum ticket to get into Grail is extremely high, and I'm not advising my own friends to get into that, for instance. What I'm advising to do is to get into a special SPV that is made by another investor, let's say, that then with this SPV will invest in Grail. So voilà. But and there are others in the market, obviously, that are mostly in the US actually, and there's a few in Europe as well. but it's a relatively young industry, obviously, and therefore that means that the exposure through fund for now is not it's not very developed. I'm sure that in 5 years it will be different, and that actually because NFT is digital and because create a fund in a digital form is extremely easy right now, I really see the situation in 5 years where you have a listed digital art fund. Probably Grail Capital will launch some fund at some point that are simply listed, and just like you buy Ethereum, on an exchange or whatsoever, you could buy some share of a digital art fund. But it will take time. It will be in 5 years from now.
I think it makes me think of the model in the Web3 world of Fingerprints DAO, for example. I know they have a token and they have like really high price, high ticket, high value NFT art in their vault. And so if you buy shares of that DAO, I think you get exposure to what is vaulted in their wallets. So that's an interesting way as well. As you said, in the more traditional world, getting exposure at a fractional level. Instead of collecting one piece, you collect 1/100th of a piece through a token or something. Is that the idea?
Yeah, totally. That's you said fingerprints, but there are many of them. There is a Flamingo DAO. There are many others that are great ones, and obviously it all depends. What is the NAV and what is the price of the token? Because obviously, as you just correctly said, it's it's basically a share of the collection that you are buying. Sometimes with a premium, sometimes with a discount. Mostly with a discount right now, I would say. Because there is no liquidity guaranteed. But yeah, this is a nice way to get exposure to that. But you have to really consider the amount, because I don't know the fingerprints token price, so I cannot comment on that. But for sure, those are good ideas.
Yeah, yeah. So when we think about, so you mentioned the different ways to get involved, but then when we go into more details, do you have a framework or advice for people to build an actual portfolio of digital art? Is there an ideal approach and structure to a portfolio?
Oh yeah, we have a very structured way to look into that. Basically, what we do is that we have we are coming from different worlds with Tim Salikov, with my partner at Grail Capital. He's coming from Morgan Stanley, Lazard, and I worked for Ledger for 6 years. I was part of the management team, and before that, I worked for a decade in traditional finance as a manager, in New York Stock Exchange and Euronext mostly. So traditional stock exchange, I would say. And we've done many things in the investment world, traditional asset management world. So we are coming up with two kind of competence. The collecting capacity, I would say, and the investment capacity. And investment is very much about, there are rules. There are rules about diversification, about risk management, and we are basically using the most advanced models of traditional asset investment, I would call, into the digital art world. And therefore we have a very precise processes regarding the selection, the building of a portfolio, a collection, and then obviously on the execution and the risk management, which also involve the way we acquire artworks. We don't simply go on OpenSea and buy the floor price or whatsoever. We are a little bit more sophisticated than that. And actually, because we are in the very last stage of closing the first acquisition program of the first SPV that we launched, we now have some very interesting figures as well on our capacity to basically invest and collect, and we are extremely happy to have been performed relatively well in sense of the price on average that we paid was I think 10% less than the floor price or on all the collection we bought on the day of acquisition. So that basically means that if we were to acquire an artwork on collection XYZ with a floor price of 10 ETH, because we have other way to source the artworks, and we have certain power of negotiation, I would say, we bought the artwork at 9 ETH instead of 10 ETH on average on all the portfolio. So that's actually interesting. And that's also why we bring value to the table and not simply, again, going on OpenSea or whatever and buy the art just like that.
Is there a little bit of alpha you can share there? Like, is it a secret that you keep closely and that is just like also considering your size and impact when it comes to the money you can invest, or is there something that private investors like myself can replicate to get the best price for your asset?
You could do that. The only difference is that as soon as you, and again, I was an amateur collector myself before, and now I'm a professional collector and an investor. And the difference is simply the time that you dedicate to things. Basically, I'm doing that full time. That means that I spend my whole day looking for the best deals, and that's my job, you know. So that's probably the only difference. Can you do it on your own in an amateur way? For sure. But again, you might be spending 2 hours per day, maybe 3 hours, and we are spending 12 hours each. So that means that we might be slightly better in our result, simply not because we are smarter, but because we spend more time and because that's our job basically. So just like it's a difference between someone that does something on the side and someone that does it full time. As simple as that.
Yeah, and I would probably draw the same parallel between full-time traders, or like people that are just collecting here and there. But I've on different occasions identified like the correlation between time spent and the value you can get. Like it's either okay, you pay full price and you spend zero time, or you invest some of your time and then you can get value out of it. Was it for whitelist grinding back in 2021, 2022? Very time consuming, but very lucrative if you were grinding for the right whitelists. Or now you can also try to look on different platforms if there's arbitrage opportunities, or you can also send wrapped ether offers, and in this market sometimes they get accepted. So there's different ways that I also try to get the best price for my assets, but it's very time consuming. So it's a balance. How much do you value your time versus the price you're gonna pay?
You said it all.
So now that we've talked about how people can approach digital art, if you invest in digital art, it's because you perceive that it's going to be more valuable in the future, or that you just like the art and that's totally okay, and that's a great way of collecting as well. But if you invest for future value, and ROI, how do you approach the future? Like for example, yourself, Jean-Michel, how do you identify who to buy so that it's a good return? Do you have top artists that you're looking at right now that are worth buying, in your opinion, of course, not financial advice, in the perspective of next bull market?
It's a very difficult question because first, you know, all the artists I'm considering to be interesting right now. I'm focusing on blue chips, what we call. So basically, artists that are already well set up, that are already culturally significant, that reach this moment and this path in their career where they are famous and they are recognized by their peers, they are recognized by collectors, they are recognized by curators. Some of them already entered into museums. So that means that the entry point is relatively high for those artists, and and they are. I will not tell any secret, but those are Xcopy, those are Reficanadol, those are Beeple, those are Snowfro with art blocks, and obviously the Chromie Squiggle. It is Tyler Hobbs with Fidenza. It's Dimitri Cherniak with Ringers. It's Claire Silver with Genesis. It's OSF with Red Light District. You just look at the billboard and the billboard of artworks, and you will find those. So I cannot provide more than that for now, because then if we go in the second category, which is more what I call the rising stars or the emerging one, then you fall in category that is still uncertain, I would say, and there's a lot of uncertainty. There is, even though they are doing good art right now, will they continue because of the bear market? I've seen in the past 6 months a lot of artists simply stopping doing art because they were not selling at all. And that's something that you cannot predict, So those artists, will they still be there in 5-10 years? It's still TBD, and that's very difficult to answer that question. And that's also why I tend to actually, even though we are living in a very digital world and I like it, that's also why I'm trying as much as possible to meet the artists I am collecting and obviously I'm investing in, because I really need to understand, what their long-term play is, and will they get the resilience to really stay, even though the market is tough right now. And that's for me a very important thing. But just like any investor, any VC investor would like to understand and know the team that they are investing in. That's exactly the same way of thinking.
Makes a lot of sense. I was talking to David Horvath yesterday, who is a real expert in brand building and very knowledgeable about how the Web3 is building culture on the PFP side. And he was saying the same thing with regards to blue chip NFTs. Like, okay, they're blue chip today, but who says that they're going to be there tomorrow? And even more so when with emerging talents is, will they still be building in the next years? That's still TBD because there's so much changing and it's a really tough period in the market. So I see your point there. And you were referring to art blocks from someone that is not at the deepest level in the art world. I see art blocks as the undisputed leader of art, digital art. It seems to me they have like a huge place right now. How do you see them? How do you see their place evolving in the coming years? Do you think art blocks will stay this lighthouse in the Web3 world, or will they decrease in relevance?
Oh no, they will stay. They will stay as they are. So they are the powerhouse of generative art. And that's for many reasons. The technological aspect, the curation aspect. Eric Calderon and his team are amazing people. They are both artists and entrepreneurs. They have a big vision and they are very smart and they exactly know what they are doing. So if I'm just looking at them from an entrepreneur standpoint, they are building a very interesting company and a very interesting platform. Obviously, because they have this engine and this regular, project to mint on a weekly basis, if not more. Obviously, all the art blocks series, I would call it, will not necessarily become super expensive and super cultural significant in the next 5 years. So it doesn't mean that after this video podcast you should run there and buy everything you see on there, because some of the things that are there will enter museum, and actually have already entered museum. But some of them will simply just be great art and with a little bit of cultural value, but not a lot of economical value. So from an investment standpoint, there are some amazing collection there, and they are already one of the most cultural significant collection in the digital art world, and it will continue to do so. So I really believe it's I don't know, I don't have any example in mind, but it's like if Warhol factory in the late 70s and early 80s managed to create a company around the factory, and that all the artists and all the art that has been created indirectly or directly at the factory or through the factory has been kind of gathered within a capsule, and this capsule would be the equivalent of art blocks right now. I really believe it will be a massive powerhouse in the years to come.
I have a last question for you, Jean-Michel. I am personally convinced that digital art will become a leading artistic movement of the 21st century. I'd like to have your opinion on that. Do you think that digital art will even surpass traditional art mediums in this century? Like, how relevant do you think it's going to become?
I am biased, and obviously, our kind of bold statement is that digital art and culture, we shall not forget culture, but digital art and culture will be a 1 trillion asset class in the next 20 years. And the reason why we believe so is that we believe that when technology enter an industry or a market, like it did with mobility, with Uber, like it did with even real estate, with WeWork and Airbnb, like it did with all the different industries of our life. Every time technology get into that market, first it is a niche market because it just solves a few people problem, and then because it increase, it eventually get bigger and bigger, and at some point it become bigger than the original market that it was targeting. And that's what happened with mobility, and that's what happened with real estate, and that's what will happen with art and culture. So because the global art market right now is around 2 trillion, so 2,000 billion USD in value, I believe that it's not impossible that in the next 20 years, digital art world and culture on public blockchain becomes a 1 trillion market. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Amazing. I'm super happy to be part of that start and that new growing asset class. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was a blast to talk to you, Jean-Michel. You're so insightful, and this is a really exciting time to be in. So thank you so much. Guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to hear more content from Fuel for Thought. I'm happy you're following us, and stay for the journey. There's a lot more to come.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all. See you soon.